So, Be'ez Hashem, we're going to learn a little bit from the Zohar, this week's Parsha, which is Parshas Mishpatim. So, the Zohar in Parshas Mishpatim, we'll start off from the beginning. Pasach Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon opens. This is the Zohar speaking about, in fact, the only place where the Zohar speaks about the idea of the reincarnation of souls, the transmigrations of souls, the reincarnation of souls. So Rav Shimon opens up and says, these are the laws that you place in front of them. So the Targum, the translation of this words is V'ilun denayu d'savne kadma. This refers to, the Unclus translates, these are the judgments in which you shall set before them. In other words, says the Zohar, Ilun inun sidurin de. These are the orders of the metaphysical idea of reincarnation, dinin nishmasim, which is the punishment or the judgment of the souls, which each one receives their appropriate punishment. That's the way it's called. In the Zohar, it's called a punishment. So let's try to understand a little bit what the Zohar is saying, just as a general introduction. So the Zohar is pointing out that this is called a din. Ela Mishpatim, these are the judgment. This is a din. A din is a judgment. That there's one form of reincarnation, which is a form of punishment. It should be clear that punishment in the Torah, generally, is not just two things that are unrelated, but it's a sibba and mesubah, like the Shalach Kodesh writes. It's a cause and effect. It's the objective correlative of an action. And the purpose of the punishment, so-called punishment, is ultimately for the purpose of the soul elevation, that the soul should reach its perfection. Same thing as anything harsh that a person's experiencing. When a person's experienced a type of din in their own life, some type of judgment, their understanding is that the judgment is really there for a soul elevation to break a person open to a higher state of consciousness and a higher way of living. That's why the Kabbalists and the Kabbalim write that the word Gilgul, which is reincarnation, numeric value is 72, which is the word for chesed, which is numeric value is the word chesed, which is kindness. So the Gilgulim is a kindness. Ultimately, the idea is that eventually all souls will reach a state of perfection. So in order for a soul to reach its highest state, so the Zohar is saying that there's a din, there's a judgment. There's judgments, like the Ari explains, there's judgments in Gehenna, which is translated very loosely as hell, like Kafakela, and Chibud HaKever. There's various forms of refinement. In one image of the Emek HaMelech, it's like a sponge that cleanses and gathers in all the negativity. So allows the soul to shine. And this process could be in different stages in the afterlife. And the harshest form of that is the form of a Gilgul, of a reincarnation. Now, in fact, to make it a little bit more clear, there are actually two types of reincarnation, two types of Gilgul. One is for the purpose of the tikkun of the different parts of the soul. The tikkun means that it should be refined, but more importantly, it should shine. All the parts of the soul should be zoret, should be illuminated, which is one form of reincarnation. This has nothing to do necessarily with an einish, with a punishment, but each soul incarnates into different lives to elevate and to reveal different aspects of the soul. So, for example, in one lifetime, a person was maybe wealthier, and the purpose in their incarnation as a wealthier person was to reveal giving charity in their lives and being charitable. In the next life, it's possible for a person to be necessarily on the other side of charity, the receiving end, and the purpose would be to receive charity, to learn how to receive, just like there's an art of giving. That's one life that we have to live. So also there's an art of receiving, which means that the soul incarnates, and this happens 630 times in general, corresponding to the 630 mitzvot, but it's much larger than that. And each time another part of the soul is revealed, another zohar, another part of the soul becomes illuminated. When that reincarnation occurs, it's not that the actual consciousness of the individual that lived in a previous life incarnates to the next life. It doesn't actually work that way, and that's why we don't have memory or conscious memory of our past life. But the soul divides itself after 120. The part of the soul that we connected with, that became our soul, that became our connection to who we are in this world. And through that, we were illuminated. And through that, we shone with a particular light. Let's say in one lifetime, we were shining with the light of giving, and we were charitable and open and expansive. So that part of our soul and the memory of who we are is retained in that part of the soul. Sort of the soul is sort of the backdrop that retains all the memory of the life that we lived. And that remains ours. That's ours eternally. What does reincarnate are sparks of the soul, parts of the soul that we didn't connect with in this life because they were dormant and they were much more concealed. And now in the next life, another part of the soul, of our collective soul, will come down to become revealed in a new life. So again, like I said, one time in this life, a person's experiencing wealth. The next life, a person's experiencing poverty. One life, a person's working on the attribute of chesed, of being expansive. The next life, they're working in the attribute of being more disciplined with gevura, learning to restrict and learning to hold back. So each lifetime, we're learning different lessons. This is something that happens to all souls generally. Also, not all souls, but generally happens to a large percentage of souls. And this is nothing necessarily to do with whether a person was a tzaddik in this lifetime, whether a person lives a very righteous life, whether a person attains their soul elevation. Because even if a person attains their full soul elevation, then other parts of the soul have to be incarnated into the next life, into another human beings, and therefore to reach that person's tikkun. And therefore, this can pass over one life to the next life to the other life. That is not that's not the judgment, that's not the harshness of reincarnation, because our conscious self does not return, our memory doesn't return, and the conscious part of self of who we are does not return into this life. But then there's another form of reincarnation, which the Zohar is over here very clearly talking about, which is the oynish, which is a form of punishment, which in this case of incarnation, it's not just sparks of who we were, the dormant parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that were deeply within us, but not revealed, become manifest in this new form of life. But our entire consciousness enters into another form of life. That is a punishment because the soul is the soul and the body fit each other like a hand and a glove. Each one is tailored to each other. The reason why we have different bodies in this world, the reason why we're shaped in different forms, and every person has their own specific ways of being in this world on a physical level, and a mental level, spiritual level, emotional level, is a reflection of the soul level. So the soul has a certain dimension, of course, it's not in a literal sense, but the soul fits the body in a very particular way. A person that has to reveal a certain type of energetic lifetime, in their lifetime, they're going to carry a certain type of body, whether it's a tall body or a thin body or a short body. Each body will be an expression of the soul potential that has to be revealed. So when the soul needs to achieve a certain type of tikkun, affect a certain type of rectification of something that was done in a past life, and as mentioned in previous shiur and previous lectures, that this is specifically with regards to monetary issues, as the Zohar Mishpatim. This is why the Zohar speaks about reincarnation, the process of reincarnation, specifically in this week's Torah portion, in the idea of Mishpatim, which is monetary issues, predominantly monetary issues. Then the entire soul has to enter, the entirety of the person's soul enters into another form of life, and that in itself can be a form of punishment, because the soul cannot express itself, because it doesn't have the right body, the right vessels, the right kalim to express its light. And that is a type of suffering in order for the soul to restrict itself and allow itself to shine in the correct way. So that's a different type. And this is what the Zohar is talking about. The Zohar over here is talking about not the regular process, which Dari speaks about in great length, of where every soul has to come down in multiple lives. And sometimes a person learns, even in learning Torah, sometimes a person learns according to Pshat, and the next life they're going to learn according to Sod, and the next life they're going to learn according to Drush. Each lifetime they're going to be attached to a certain way of thinking. They're going to be very pragmatic or very mystical or very analytical. Each lifetime we're going to have a certain type of intelligence that we're going to be connected to, and we're going to have to elevate them. That happens through our multiple lives, and the entire structure of our soul has to go through all the multiple incarnations in order to elevate and activate every single dimension of our soul through the mitzvahs, which are the conduit that elevate and allow access to all the different parts of our soul. That's one form of reincarnation. It has nothing to do necessarily with punishment. And again, that's parts of our soul that incarnate and not the fullness of who we are. So our memory and our conscious memory of our past life doesn't reincarnate. But then there's another form of reincarnation where our conscious memory and who we remember who we are incarnate into another form of life for the purpose of tikkun. So this is what the Zohar is talking about. Now the Zohar continues, that the pasuk says, the verse says that there's a servant, the Hebrew slave, that he serves for 6 years, and then on the 7th year he goes free. So what the Zohar says that I'll now explain you some mysteries, secrets of the world of incarnation. When the soul is liable to go through the process of reincarnation for the purpose of for some type of refinement of punishment, if the soul comes from the root of the great matarton, which is the Sar Shaloilam, I think Mara says Yivamas, which means if the soul root is from this world, the Inu Kalashit Sitrin, which is that this soul is connected to the 6 Sfirot, or the 6 years, 6 dimensions, then Ksiv Sheishon Yavad, he should serve for 6 years, because Gilgul only happens for 6 years, until he elevates and refines through successive incarnations, completing the 6 stages, and because that's connected to the region from where he came from. So what the Zohar is saying is that there are souls that come from the world of Matartan. There's souls that come from the world of the 6, which means these are souls that are connected to the tree of good and evil, the Chet Eitzadas. These are souls that were affected by Adam and Chava eating from the tree of oneness, the tree of life. Instead of eating from the tree of life, they ate from the tree of duality, which is the same tree. There's only one eitz, B'soich Hagan, in the middle of the garden, but it's an issue of identification. If they identified themselves with the world duality of separation versus the reality of the oneness. When Adam and Chava did this, it's just like Adam and Chava are the physical parents of the human race, of the human species. The same thing also they represent, like the Medrash even says, and there's different souls. Same thing also on the level of souls. There's souls that are connected to the hand, the feet, etc., that are within the great soul of Adam Kamlan. In general, the incarnation happens in 6 times. And if this is literally read as 6 times, that the soul will come down for 6 times, this is a little bit different than it speaks about in other books of Kabbalah, certainly by the Ari also as well, that it's only 3 times. But here we're talking about, again, this is the purpose for Einish, which means that the soul did something, a mistake, did something wrong in a previous life, and never did tshuva. And of course, tshuva means to return and to transform yourself in a way that it retroactively creates the mistake into a merit. This is the highest level of tshuva, which means that any moment we have in our life, we have the possibility of transforming our life in a way that completely undoes things that we have done in our past. But not only does it undo things that are done in our past, but it completely transforms things that were negative into something that's positive. So if the soul did not do that, then the soul has to incarnate. What is the soul that incarnates? The soul that incarnates is the entirety of the soul, not just the part of our soul which breaks itself off, and part of it goes into the paradise, and part of it comes down to reincarnate, which is the general course of reincarnation. But here, the soul itself, who we are, fullness of who we are, has to incarnate. As Zohar says, it has to incarnate 6 times, it has to have 6 tries. And the idea is that not like the other incarnation, which we said could be 613 and plus times, many, many times, because it's not the purpose for Einish. But here the purpose is that it has to fix something that it was done in the past life. It stole money, and it has to return money, for example, and it has 6 tries, or 3 tries, more correctly, according to the way we understand it. 6 maybe is the idea of the fullness of life, of the fullness of the material world, like the Maral understands the idea of 6, which is the 4 directions up and down, right, left, front, and center, which represent the fullness of creation. The Shishim Ribu, therefore there's 600,000, that's the total number of Klal Yisrael. The idea of the fullness of creation. So if the soul is rooted in that source, then the soul will have to come down these multiple times in order for the soul to reach its soul elevation. This is these are if souls are connected to that world, to the world of the six. But if the soul is connected to the side of the Shekhinah, the Yushvi, which is the seventh, Shvi Yatzal Chav Shekhinah, which on the seventh it says he goes free. The tzaddik vadi less b'malacha. Tzaddik certainly doesn't have to do toil, doesn't have to work. Even less malacha, less b'shibud. But since it doesn't do malacha, since it doesn't toil, there's no slavery. It's not mishubad. It doesn't become enslaved. Less b'shibud. And the souls that are connected to the level of the tzaddik of the seventh, connected to the Shekhinah, these are not subjected to any type of labor or servitude. What does this mean? Now the Zohar says that there's another type of souls. There are souls, there are two types of souls. There are souls that are connected, and not one is higher or lower, this is not a hierarchy, but the different types of souls. There are souls that are connected to the world of labor, the world of struggle, which are connected to Adam Chava after the Chet, after the eating from the tree of knowledge. These are the souls that have to come down and have to labor. And if they did something wrong in a previous life, then they have to come down and labor and have trial and tribulations in order to rectify the things that we did in their past lives. This is one possibility. But if it's a soul, which Dari calls, these are neshamas chadashas mamash, these are literal new souls, these are souls that are beyond the chet. They come from the place that's beyond the eating from the tree of knowledge, that were not affected by the demotion that happened to Adam Chava on a physical level. Which the Gemara Chagigan said had him both say that he was both vertically and horizontally expanded from one end of the earth to the other, and then there was the breaking apart of him, and he became shorter, so to speak. And the Zohar and the Kabbalah understands is that not just on a physical level, but this represents the metaphysical level and a spiritual level. All the souls that were connected to him fell off, so to speak. So not if that's those souls, that the souls have to have trial and tribulations, and those are souls that need to work on themselves, and they have to go through different processes of elevation. But if a person has a soul that comes from a place that is beyond the world of the six, which is connected to the world of the seven, which is the idea of Shabbos, of freedom, of peace, of harmony, that and ultimately beyond being subjugated to any type of labor and servitude. If these are souls that come from that area, then there's no work, there's no movement, and everything is Shabbos. And therefore, these souls do not experience any hardship. This is what the Zohar says. Now, all of a sudden, then all of a sudden, it chanced upon that while Rav Shimon was speaking these words, the ancient one, which represents the place of deep wisdom, came down to the side and asked, Rabbi, he said, my master, if this is true, what you just said, that the souls of the righteous, the souls that come from the Shekhinah, souls that come from the place of seven, which is beyond the Chet, beyond the eating from the tree of knowledge, the place of unity. If this is true, that these are souls that come from that place, so then then what does it say upon these souls? What is the additional delight or thing that the soul receives when the pasuk says, and on the seventh day, you shouldn't do any malacha, you shouldn't do any type of works. In other words, if this is true, that these are souls that are beyond the world of labor and work and involvement and movement, so what does it mean that they should not do malacha, they shouldn't do any work? If they did not reincarnate, in other words, if they did not reincarnate into the next life for any purpose of any type of refinement or any type of punishment for the purpose of elevation, like the other souls that we said before, that sometimes the harshness of what they did cannot be rectified in a higher spiritual realm, in the world of Gehenim or Kafakel or any of these types of processes in the afterlife. But they must reincarnate into this world to affect a certain change that happened in their previous life. So if this is true, that these are souls for regular souls, for most souls, but there are certain souls that are in the place of freedom and do not reincarnate. So what does the Torah say? What does it mean in the verse that says that they shouldn't do any malacha? They shouldn't do any work. Of course they don't do any work. They're beyond work, and therefore they're not going through any processes. In simple language, if the idea of work as process means that it's moving towards a certain direction, there's a certain perfection that's happening. If we say that there's the regular souls that we say that come from the world of six, which is a place of movement, the place of opposites, the place of dualities, of separation, the place of movement, the place of process that have to be refined, then we say these are the souls that come down to reincarnate in case they did something so terrible in their past life that they need to rectify things in this present life. But if they're a level of the souls that come from the level of freedom, the level of Shabbos, the level of the seventh, they don't reincarnate. So what does it mean they shouldn't do any malacha? They don't have to do any work. Of course they don't do any work. They don't even reincarnate. Reb Shimon said, "O venerable companion, should a man of this learning ask this? What does it mean that you ask this question?" So the Zohar says, Reb Shimon says that even though if these souls have to reincarnate in all different forms of life, and even into an animal, like transmigrate into an animal, still it says even when they enter into those places, they shouldn't do any work. In other words, they do incarnate. That the tzaddik comes from these levels of soul, that comes from the world of Shabbos. You shouldn't do any malacha. What does this mean? What is the Zohar saying? So first of all, interesting to note, the Zohar is actually referring to not only does this occur reincarnation between one human being and another, but there's also the idea of the possibility of a transmigration, which means the soul goes into another form of life. But it doesn't speak about anything about an inanimate object. And the way that Riyah Kodesh writes, it could be also even a harsher form of oynish, a harsher form of punishment or refinement, that the soul has to even enter into another place where it cannot express itself at all. When it enters into another form of life of a human being, then it's like a human, even though it doesn't fit exactly in its exact form. Like we said, that the soul is vested within the body, like a hand is vested within a glove, and each one fits each other. In fact, it's the reverse, that the soul is the metaphysical structure of the body that's reflected and manifested in the physical body. But if it reincarnates into another body, the entirety of the previous life of who you are, which is the exact shape of your body that was previously lived, is now reincarnated into another form of life, if it goes into another form of another body. So it's true that it doesn't have the exact same form. Maybe it was tall, now it's short, now it's thin, now it's thick, and has different dimensions of the body. It still has some dimensions of the same aspects. It still has hands, it still has feet, etc. So therefore, it does have some type of reflection, some type of imprint, and some type of possibility of expression. If it enters another form of life, into an animal, for example, then it has less possibility of expression and therefore experiences more pain. And the pain is the process of elevation. The pain breaks open the soul to receive higher light, like we said before, much like in life itself, that the experience that feel painful in life is only there to crack you open, to open you up, so you can experience even more light. But if it enters into another form of life, it's even deeper experiences of pain, of lack of expression. The Zohar doesn't speak about the last form, which is when the soul eventually can also possibly, and this is the harshest form of punishment, the harshest form of process of elevation, is when the soul actually also enters into another form of existence that's inanimate. So not only vegetation, but even an inanimate object, and has no expression whatsoever. And that's really frustrating and painful for the soul. But that's we have a Thomas where it says sometimes he became like a stone, which means that he became, because he spoke negative words. For example, in the case of Novel, he became a stone, which means he reincarnated into a stone. He transmigrated into a stone. That's the first thing. Not the Zohar, but let's go a little bit further. What is the Zohar actually saying? The Zohar is saying like this: that even when a soul of a tzaddik does come down to this world to do tshuva, to rectify things of their past deed, so this soul that enters into this life, so let's say the person in the previous life was a tzaddik, reached a perfect soul elevation of who they were to be in this world, the way they shone with the same light that they existed with Adam Kana and the primordial being. Their story was an exact reflection of the ultimate story of creation, how they should be. And they entered into this world and they did something, but they did one mistake. And Chazal said, the word says in Chagiga, that the fires of Gehenna, whatever what this means on the terms of its metaphor, is not shalat, doesn't have any sway, doesn't have any power over tzaddikim. So therefore, this soul does have to reincarnate. And the Zohar, what Shimon is saying is the soul does reincarnate. However, it enters into a situation that it will only have benefit from the descent. It is karev l'schar v'rachak l'hefsed. It is close to receiving its reward, but further and distant from a place of descent, which means the soul will reincarnate. That's what Rav Shimon is saying, that the soul of the Shabbos, the soul of the Shekhinah, the soul that's connected to the place of freedom, which is the tzaddik. If this tzaddik did something once wrong, it's not possible for a person to live their whole life and not do one mistake. Even the chata, in a way, chata means off the mark. That it did something that was a little off the mark. They said the right thing, but at the wrong time, or they said the right thing to the wrong person. So it's possible that even a tzaddik can have a small defect in his or her state. So then this soul has to come down into this world. But it goes down to the world in a situation, it enters into a body that will only receive its reward and its benefit, not its benefit. It means it enters into a situation of the soul or incarnated into a person that will be close to being of a tzaddik. That means it enters into the soul. Let's say, for example, and this is the metaphor, an example. Let's say that the person has both parents that are big tzaddikim, and they're going to be raised in a very righteous and pure home, in a holy home, and the soul is a very holy soul. So therefore, this soul, 80% of chance is it's karev l'schar that the soul will reach its soul elevation, at least close to it. Then the soul of this tzaddik will reincarnate in the soul of this other tzaddik, this other person, and therefore it will see its elevation through this other person. It should be clear. I think it wasn't made clear that when the soul incarnates in its regular form of incarnation, which each life is trying to express another thing, let's say one time rich, one time poor, one time giving, one time receiving, one time kindness, and one time discipline, then the entire soul of what's the part of the soul, the entirety becomes the soul of the person that it's animating. But when the soul comes down for the purpose of oynish, purpose of tikkun, for something that it did in its past life, then the soul, it doesn't become the soul of the person that it's inhabiting. The soul of the person that's inhabiting has its own soul, has its own tikkun, has its own purpose. But now the soul enters into the soul as well, attaches itself, becomes part of the process of being in the soul, that it also becomes part of their soul for the purpose of their elevation. So let's say this soul it did something in kind in a past life. So it enters into a person that will generally have a very kind nature, and the parents are very kind, and they can be raised in a very kind environment, and that person will probably be a kind person. And through that person, with their own individual soul, reaching a state of kindness, the soul that's incarnated together with this process will go through the same process of being very kind, and therefore will undo something that was done in their past life. Then there's one last piece of Saba Shabbos. The Shabbos, so he says, if the Saba says, if this is true, that this is the level of the soul of a tzaddik, the soul of Shabbos, the soul of the Bas Chida, which is the daughter of the righteous one, the daughter of the only one. So what does it mean that this person can take another wife? If another wife he will take. If this is talking about the soul of the righteous, what does it mean another? There is no other. The Shabbos. And that's called the maidservant. What does this mean? Very quickly. This means as following: that sometimes the Neshama Tzaddik will come down for a certain period of time as an ibur, an impregnation, into a lower form of life, into another person even. This is in Macheres Hitin life, if he receives another wife. But then, if the soul of the tzaddik enters into this body, he or she, the soul of this previous tzaddik, is only like a guest that comes and goes and is only there for their elevation, which means like this is another form of reincarnation. So there's three forms of reincarnation we just explained. The first form of reincarnation is generally souls that go from one life to the next life, and each time another aspect of their soul enters into this world for the purpose of revealing a new aspect of their soul in this lifetime. One lifetime chesed, one lifetime gura. This generally happens 613 times, or variations of that in different types of tikkunim that happen, different types of elevations that happen through every different lifestyle. And now, as we're living closer to Iknus Sheikh at the end of times, now we're working on different aspects within that. So more like holographically interconnectivity between different parts of our consciousness, different parts of the souls throughout different lifetimes. And we're tweaking these things to reveal themselves in a particular way, in a very distinct way through our life. That's one thing. And that is not for the purpose of punishment, but that's just the soul process of reincarnation. The soul constantly reincarnates in order for the soul to be perfected in all its levels and revealed in all levels of being. That's one type of reincarnation. Then the other type of reincarnation, which the Zohar over here is talking about, which is din in the Mishpatim, the laws of Mishpatim, the idea of din, of judgment. This is a reincarnation where the souls enter into reincarnation for the purpose of a punishment being there was some type of defect that happened in a previous life. This thing cannot be worked itself out in the afterlife for whatever reason, because it's too dense. And it's also something that's connected to the material, something that's connected to the physical. Like we said, it's a monetary issue, let's say. So this cannot be worked on a spiritual level. Let's say a person stole money or was not kind to another person in a past life. You can't undo that in the next life. A person doesn't put on tefillin, doesn't keep Shabbos. That's possible for a person to refine themselves even in an afterlife process. But in here, we need to actually enter back into this world. So the Zohar says that in the second level of reincarnation, there's actually two levels of soul. There are souls that are connected to the world of the six, which are connected to the world of Matarta, which is connected to the world, the way the physical world and the world of duality, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, connected to the souls that fell from the great soul of Adam and Chava after they ate from the tree of knowledge, which is the broken souls. And therefore, those souls need to enter into this world. And if they need to create a tikkun, so not only do they parts of their soul enter, but their fullness of their soul enter into other forms of life. And the Zohar says other forms of life, even in other types of life, like and even in the world of the animal kingdom. And the soul enters there in a place of struggle, and which means that it can experience the hardship and the struggle in order to work itself out. Then there are souls of tzaddikim that enter into those places but don't experience the same type of struggle, the same type of hardship, because they are from the world of freedom. And then the Zohar says there's another form where it does experience different types of or experiences, but again, not exactly in the same way, but more like a guest that's appearing into a person's host, into the host body. That means the body is already in the second level of Gilgul. The soul attaches itself to the Gilgul of the person that's already alive. It becomes part of their soul and goes through the same whole process. In the first type of person, it goes through a process where this person maybe has challenges and they go through the same challenges. And the second type of person, where the person's a tzaddik, they will come and reincarnate and become part of the soul of a person that will probably be a tzaddik. It's karav levade. It's close to certainty that this person will be a tzaddik, so therefore they don't go through the hardships. That's the second level of reincarnation, the second type of reincarnation in the second level, which is the level of a tzaddik. And then the third type of reincarnation is impregnation, where the soul does go into a place that is not necessarily a person that's a tzaddik. A person that could be in a previous level of tzaddik will enter into impregnate a situation or a person that is not necessarily a tzaddik, only for the purpose of achieving a certain type of elevation through that person as well. So again, there are three types of reincarnations, three types of transmigrations of souls, 1, 2, and 3. And in the level of 2 itself, there are two types. One will become a part of the soul that is like a regular person, or a person that's challenged, a person that has struggle, which again, this is not a schematic thing of saying one is better than the next. Like the Alter Rebbe writes also in Tanya, that there's different types of matam, different types of pleasures, divine pleasure. Some of the pleasure is from perfection, and some of the pleasure is from the imperfection. Some of the pleasure is from struggle, and some of the pleasure is from beyond the struggle. There are different types of desire from on high. And that's one type. And then there's another type where this person, which is a tzaddik in the previous life, will enter into the body of someone that was similar to a tzaddik in a previous life. In this life, someone that has the potential to be a tzaddik. So therefore, they don't have those struggles. It'll be chafshi, it'll be freedom within that place. And then, l'sas malach, they won't have any malach, they won't have any challenges and movements and anxieties and tensions the way the other person will. And then there's another type where the person will enter, the tzaddik will enter in the previous life, will enter even to a place where there is struggle and there is strife, and the person's living with a lot of torment, and the person's living with a lot of struggle and desire and yearning, trying to make something out of their life, which is most people living from that place of chosha, place of darkness, and trying to overcome that place of darkness. And there the soul will enter as an impregnated soul. The soul will be there for a period of time as a guest, receive what it needs to receive in terms of its elevation, and then will disappear. When a person's experiencing an Ibur, which the Zohar doesn't talk about it, but when a person's experiencing this type of impregnation, the person that's going through a lot of struggle, sometimes people can experience this and even understand this and talk about their experiences. And sometimes when a person is going through a lot of struggle, all of a sudden they feel like they have another dose of energy, a dose of enlightenment, a dose of clarity that enters into them. It seems something almost outerworldly, and they feel like they're charged and they can figure their life out and they can make the right moves, and it's clear to them how they have to do things. That's because they're impregnated now with the soul of a tzaddik. It can be the soul of their own soul in their past life, which could be already on the level of tzaddik. It can be a soul of another person that's tzaddik. It can be a soul like even a tzaddik that's alive. There are various different types of ibur, various types of impregnation, but the person feels this soul elevation, feels this expansiveness, this clarity, and it lasts for a period of time, and then it disappears. And one person who ever wonders, why does it disappear? Because the truth is, it wasn't you. It was not part of who you were. It was another level of soul that attached itself to you for a period of time, for them to receive their elevation that they need to receive. And now it went on its way, and now you're left in the state that you're at. There's also even the possibility that a person can daven, can pray, like Dr. Rebbe writes in it's possible level of, sometimes a person goes to the grave of a tzaddik and plays, does his dafka rucha berucha, and can connect themselves like the middle horizon on the highest level of connectivity to a person prays at the grave of a tzaddik when the Shekhinah rests in the place of the Shekhinah, that there can also be an impregnation, an ibur for a period of time from the tzaddik, for the person that's praying. But these are many different levels of ibur, which is beyond the discussion I want to talk about. And this essentially is what the Zohar is saying, the different types of reincarnation. The first reincarnation the Zohar doesn't talk about. The Zohar is talking about the second type of reincarnation, which is the point for Einish, for the point of refinement of something that was done in the past life that needs correction, not just like in the first form of reincarnation, which is that every soul needs to reveal itself in different ways. But this is something that actually was misdone, done wrong in a previous life that has perfection. And that itself, there are two ways how this can happen. The soul will attach itself to become part of the soul of the person that is going through struggle, which is the Beni, the intermediary person of the soul, will connect itself and become part of a person that's thinking the person that has the soul of a tzaddik. Of course, the person has free choice, but they're karav l'schar, they're closer to reward, closer to receive elevation. That's another form of the higher level of the souls of tzaddikim that reincarnate. And then there's a form of impregnation where the soul of tzaddikim will actually enter into a person that's also struggling, and precisely for the person to achieve a certain clarity to allow them to overcome their struggle, and also for the soul of the tzaddik, the soul of the righteous, already is perfected, to reach their last level of perfection of things that was done in their past life. It still needs a little tshuva. Have a wonderful Shabbos.